what is happening, what will continue to happen, is that activists will bypass the voting box and go straight to corporate boardrooms. It's this little thing called ESG, right? Environmental social governance. And it is simply a way for the government, for activists and some of those within the government who wants it. You can't get it passed in Congress, so you bypass the voting box and you go straight into the corporate boardrooms. And now we see these business elites like BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, and Coca-Cola and other companies that are using their leverage to force upon the American people different American values, right? And so you see that going on and on and on again. So now we're approaching the time when the federal government will not be so, big government and trying to impede upon your personal rights, or even trying to usurp the state government. They would just bypass all of that and use these large corporations. And that is what they're doing under ESG.
They also have a thing called impact investment, which is a big buzzword in 21st century investment.
Yes.
So they get corporations, they go to the board, they basically get the board to think a certain way, and then that's where they put their money, whether it's through charity or whatever, into events that they want to see happen, or people that they think will spread the message that they want them to spread, YouTubers, things like that.
Absolutely. Well, yeah. Well, I mean, like for example, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, the three of those asset managers, they manage over $22 trillion, right? And that is larger than than America's GDP. So they manage more money than the wealthiest country, America, right? And so that's a tremendous amount of influence. So when you look at just these three asset managers alone, they own 21% of Exxon stocks, and they leverage all of that buying power to go in to kick off three of their board members on Exxon's and replace them with three activist board members, right? And then once they take over the largest of all of the oil and gas companies, now they just use them as poster children as they go to Chevron and Mobil and others and say, if you don't do what we tell you to do when it comes to stop drilling, or to adopt more, or to try to transition faster away from oil and into renewable energy, then we're going to do to your company what we just did to the largest company, Exxon. That's exactly what they did. And so they are literally not only destroying the fiduciary responsibility between the manager who manages the individual investor's money. So they're messing up that relationship, because if you're managing my money, your only focus should be on maximizing my shareholders' wealth. But if you're no longer focused on maximizing my shareholders' wealth, but now pushing a particular narrative, now you're changing traditional American values and you're bypassing the voting box to do it.
That's my concern with doctors too, because it used to be a doctor to patient. It was like the investor to the investment manager, and that was all they cared about, was the health of the patient. Now you've got, I don't know if BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard are on the boards of hospitals as well, of insurance agencies. I wouldn't be surprised to find out.
Yes, they are.
And so is it confirmed that they will?
Scope 3 is something that you find in Chevron, for example. And so what Scope 3 is, which is what these activists are pushing, it forces private companies to become the big brother of every other company in their supply chain, right? So if you're Chevron, you should just be focused on finding investments to drill more oil, especially in a time that we find ourselves right now. But instead, Scope 3 says not only do you need to be green new energy compliant, but that insurance company that's selling you insurance to protect your workers, you need to now play big brother to them and make sure that they too are moving towards doing everything they need to do to be clean energy.
You're absolutely right on the money, and I would even say it goes even bigger than private corporations. It happens to other countries like Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, of course, we're going along with the ESG score, implementing the ESG policies. The World Economic Forum was like, they're doing great and amazing. They're going to be the biggest and brightest stars in the developing world. And
look at you now.
What happened to Sri Lanka? They were deliberately destroyed by the policies that they were extorted and manipulated to implement that pushed diversity, all these issues, diversity, wokeness, gender equality, all of that. And then what happened when they put in all the green policies and all the policies that, of course, it wrecked and utterly destroyed their country. And this wasn't an accident. This was done deliberately. And now the same policies that were tested in Sri Lanka, that were tested on the corporations, are being implemented globally and are being introduced here in the United States and will topple the Western world from what I'm seeing.
It wasn't a mistake.
No, it wasn't.
Everything we're seeing in Sri Lanka with the food riots and the gas shortages and all that, that's the intended consequence. They outright are saying it. They're telling farmers not to farm. They're saying, the farming is bad for the environment, so don't do it, even though we're facing a food shortage because of the war. They're saying they want to shut down fossil fuels. What do you think happens? Take a look at Sri Lanka. If that's the country you want to live in, by all means, keep on moving forward with these policy plans. But I'll tell you, it's not the conservatives, the libertarians, and the post-liberals who are going to be dealing with it, because these people are getting out of cities. It's going to be the urban liberal who is oblivious, waking up one day and being like, why are there marauders running through the streets, stealing everything? Why is there no food? And what do I do?
People in the countryside aren't impervious, because what happens is corporations will try to sue the American people. The Trans-Pacific Partnership was setting it up so that corporations could sue the American government if we were discriminating, was the language, against their oil company, whether we weren't following ESG standards as citizens or we weren't buying their oil. And then the taxpayer has to pay for that. And the government will find Joey Baloney out in the middle of nowhere in the woods and charge him taxes for some corporation's agenda in Malaysia. And how do you escape from that other than blatantly breaking the law?
Citizen of the world. Like, you're now a citizen of the world, right? So we are now responsible for what happens in another country. I mean, when you think about these 87,000 new IRS agents who may or may not be armed, this is the world in which we're about to wake up in. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. This is very intentional.
Yeah.
None of this feels organic, right? That it just happened upon us in 2 short years. I mean, this feels very intentional.
This has been coming and building up for a very long time. Some people say before even the UN 2030 vision, even before that, there was other visions and other projects that were pushing forward to the same end goal. But just back to the Sri Lanka point, because I think it's an important one. Sri Lanka had a 98 plus ESG score. Wow. Right? And they did everything when it came to energy policy, domestic policy, hiring policies, governmental policies. They followed and obeyed, because they were the poorest country that literally were extorted at the barrel of a gun, just like we saw with Economic Hitman, with that amazing book that detailed the decades of U.S. actions against the developing world. Confessions of an Economic Hitman, sorry there. Great book, detailed how they were doing this. Now they're doing this under a new disguise, under a new woke term. It's called ESG, as you were bringing up. And it's not just the acquisition and the takeover of corporations. It's the takeover of countries. They beta tested Sri Lanka. Now they're going to be testing it on the rest of the world.
What happened in Sri Lanka?
ESG is basically the Chinese Communist Party for the West.
It is.
And when you're in China and you start a business, at a certain point, you need an office for the Chinese Communist Party in your business. That's what we were told by some experts on the issue.
It's true.
So in the United States, what they're doing is ESG as the exact same thing. It is the ideological component that all businesses must adhere to,
right,
giving some unified authority control over your business and what you're allowed to say or do.
You've confirmed that BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, they buy 18 to 22% of a public company, and they have a lot. If not, they have so many publicly traded companies. They have like 18%. Do they then put 3 board members on their board? Is that like every time?
I'm not sure about every time, but that is exactly what they did with Exxon. Again, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard. Now, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of these asset managers. These are just the top 3. And they manage over $22 trillion of assets around the world, right? And again, that's larger than the entire GDP of America. So I say that to say these people own they have a tremendous amount of power and clout and leverage. And specifically to ExxonMobil, they own, the 3 of them, 21% of Exxon shares. And so what they did is that they worked alongside this very small activist manager, I think it's called Engine Number One, and who had no clout to do anything. But Engine Number One put up these three activist board members, and BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard. They decided to come alongside Engine Number One and to use their leverage and their proxy votes to vote in those three board members, right? So they kicked out three, added three, and ExxonMobil has gone woke.
You want to read? Can you read that one, Ian? Are you able to?
This might be one. It might be a challenge. Where
The whole thing, the whole BlackRock.
that is blurry for me.
All right, let me read it.
Okay.
BlackRock Inc. is an American multinational investment company based in New York City. Founded in 1988, initially as a risk management and fixed income institutional asset manager. BlackRock is the world's largest asset manager with US $10 trillion in assets under management as of January 2022. BlackRock operates globally with 70 offices in 30 countries and clients in 100 countries. BlackRock has sought to position itself as an industry leader in environmental, social, and corporate governance, ESG. The company has faced criticism for worsening climate change, its close ties to the Federal Reserve System during the COVID-19 pandemic, anti-competitive behavior, and its unprecedented investments in China. And you know what? I'll just add as the cherry on top, BlackRock just sounds like the name of a villainous organization from a Mission Impossible movie.
I have my BlackRock right here. It's called Obsidian, and I believe that's where they got the name. It's from Obsidian, the looking glass.
No, there's a lot of occult symbology when it comes to BlackRock, Black Cube, which is also an Israeli intelligence private contracting agency. There's also religious aspects here, spiritual aspects here.
Oh, that's like Mecca is the big black cube.
Exactly. So there's a lot more reference to this than a lot of people realize.
Blackstone also. This is all about this Black Rock. I don't know if it's volcanic glass or what they're talking. What's Mecca?
It's called the Kaaba.
Kaaba. What's it made out of?
I don't actually know, but it's been there for a while. It's actually pretty Islamic.
It's not the you're talking about Mecca? It's the thing inside of it.
Correct.
Right,
correct.
yeah.
The outer thing is not actually, it's commonly misconstrued as that's the outer thing, but it's actually just a small thing that's been inside of Mecca for thousands of years, pre-Islam, if I'm correct.
I heard it was like a meteorite or something.
Yes,
now we're
that's what
talking.
they say.
Yes.
Regarding anti-competitive behavior for BlackRock, I've read that BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard own each other, and it's just a cycle.
Probably shares of each other now.
Yeah, I would. If anyone in the chat can source that data for me and send it to me on Twitter or Minds, I'd love to have another look at it. This was like 10 years ago, 6 years ago when I was Who owns these companies? I want to find the names of the guys, but it just turns out it's other corporations. And he's the CEO, Larry Fink.
Founder.
Of BlackRock.
The founder. But who owns it? I don't know. The CEO doesn't even have to have a percent of the company.
Aliens.
And when you ask people, well, what is ESG? No one really knows what ESG is. I mean, it's a huge dichotomy between what they say it is and how it's going to revolutionize capitalism, and then there's reality of what's actually going on, right? And it gets more and more insidious as you go in. When you look at the credit rating agencies, I mean, they're making money hand over fist. BlackRock alone, they charge 5 times the fees for their ESG awareness funds versus other funds that are just basic with all kinds of companies in there. But then when you look at these ESG aware companies when you look at these ESG funds and you look at the companies that are on the inside of them, BlackRock, again, one of the largest ESG awareness funds, 90% of those companies and those awareness funds are also in the S&P 500, right? So what's the difference, right? But you're charging 5 times the fee.
I want to tell you why West Virginia is best Virginia and why it is one of the best states. In BlackRock's Wikipedia, it has a West Virginia section. Riley Moore, the state treasurer of West Virginia, said in June 2022 that BlackRock and 5 other financial institutions would no longer be allowed to do business with the state of West Virginia because of their advocacy against the fossil fuel industry. Moore said, at a time when energy demand is skyrocketing and consumers are bearing the brunt of generationally high inflation, it makes absolutely no sense for financial institutions to cut off capital and financing to these legal, profitable industries simply because they don't align with their radical social and political agendas. So good on you, West Virginia.
Yeah, I don't want to. This is when I was earlier talking about the states revolting against a corrupt government that's trying to censor them. It's more about the corporations that we should be focused on.
Exactly. Because again, they are doing what would never get passed in Congress. So they are if you and I, or if America wants to change our values to where we just want to ditch fossil fuel and who cares if the economy crashes? Let's just all move down the path of renewables. Then we should be able to go into a voting booth and we should just vote in all leftists, right? Who say that they just want to destroy America energy. If we want to say, listen, parents do not control our children. We want the government to be able to control our children. If we want to start saying, listen, it's all about social justice. You don't have to earn your title. Meritocracy is out the window. We should be able, as Americans, to go into a voting booth and vote those values into our country. But that would never pass because you will never get the majority of Americans to say, yeah, we just want to upend everything. So what they're doing is they're bypassing you and I as voters to decide what kind of country we want to live in. And they're going to these corporate board elites, and they are now using their leverage, all of their money, to go into these corporations and say, either you align with what we're saying about environmental, that's climate change. The S is
Social.
Yeah, social,
Wokeness.
which is wokeness, which is CRT, transgenderism, with your children, transitioning your children. And then the governance, ESG, the governance, it is actually, I liken it to the glue that's bringing all of it together, right? The E, the S, and the G. And so they're going to these corporations and they're saying either you align with what we say, you need to have X number of women, X number of black people, X number. Doesn't matter if they earned it. Doesn't matter if they deserve it. You just put them on your in leadership because we say it. That is what they're doing.
And they're saying it to the boards of the companies. And is it just like, if you're
And
not
it's
going to go
trickling
along,
down.
so then they'll buy off like certain members of the board and be like, now that we have a majority of the board paid off,
We'll just take
you better
over.
do what we say or we're going to kick you off the board kind of thing.
And it's not just that. I mean, like, that's one of the things that they did. I mean, like, as an example, that's what they did to Exxon. They replaced 3 of the board members of Exxon and they put in 3 very liberal activists, climate change activists, as board members on Exxon, right? So that was one of them coming in and kind of taking over the board. But another thing that these companies get to do, again, they manage a tremendous amount of assets. And so one of the things they can do is just underweight how much of your assets they're going to put their money in, right? Yeah. And if you're a publicly held company and people are selling off your stocks, that's not a good thing. You want people to be buying your stocks, right? A lot of these CEOs, their bonuses, their compensation is tied to their stock value. So instead of taking over your board, they can simply underweight you because you're not aligning with their principles.
What's
They
underweight?
pretty much work like the mafia. They come to you and they're like, you're going to do what we say or we're going to steal money from you and beat you down and destroy your livelihood. And then a lot of these companies comply because they want a good score. They want to comply with everything that they're doing. But I think you're also wrong, Ian, by just calling them corporations. They're not just private corporations. They are entities that are working with the U.S. Federal Reserve, printing money out of thin air, funneling it into Wall Street with no accountability, with no track record, with no transparency at all. And now when you have the coffers of the Federal Reserve at your beck and call, you could do whatever you want. You could say, hey, we're going to invest money here. We're going to put money here. We're going to give this company here, this corporation here, all this money. You want some of it? You got to go along. Get on your knees and worship the altar of our rule that we're going to be, of course, pushing on everyone. And it's even beyond just even BlackRock. California mandated increased diversity on their corporate boards. That was a law. They had to comply. So this was going along with their policies that are being implemented, not through just economic force, but also government force, as we're seeing the same people responsible for a lot of these policies coalesce and implement them in all aspects of life.
You're right that calling corporations is not accurate. They need new names for these megacorps, but then the word corp is in there. I'd rather just call them something unique when they become, so prolific. Cabals, that's a good way to put it. Legal cabals. You said that they underweight a corporation. How does that work? If a BlackRock were to have, what are they? They own 20% of the company. So how would they do that? What would that look like?
Well, just for example, like I said, they have just those top 3, $22 trillion, right? And then they get to decide how much of their money, of your money, because it's really your money. It's not their money. You invest in one of their funds, right? And so they're supposed to have this fiduciary responsibility where it's all about maximizing your profitability. And so they take your money. So I say their money, but it's not really their money. They manage roughly $22 trillion. And so they can decide where they want to put that money.
And that's stakeholder capitalism.
Stakeholder. Now, define a stakeholder, right? You're here in America and you're, busting your hump. My grandfather, he was a janitor. It was just, and so he could take his money and try to invest, and he wants to retire, but instead of investing along his values, his principles, and investing for the purpose of maximizing his few dollars so that one day maybe he can retire, send his kids off to college, they take that money and they say, well, hey, my stakeholder is not you, the shareholder, right? My stakeholder is, I don't know, climate change in some remote part of Africa, right? Building roads or schools or social justice in some, I don't know, in the Amazon somewhere. So it's very nebulous. It's very, there's a tremendous amount of ambiguity. The SEC has now gotten involved because there's a lot of greenwashing where you have people who are just saying they're green or that they're ESG compliant just because, in essence, I liken it to designer label. Right? ESG is nothing more than a designer label. And you want to have that designer label because now you can charge more fees. You look chic. People want to invite you to the Christmas party. And because there's nothing good that's coming out from this.
So how did we end up with Dr. Oz instead of you? Well, Dr. Oz, he doesn't seem to know anything about this. He doesn't talk about it. It seems very generic. You seem to be extremely knowledgeable on all of these issues internationally and domestically. And the people of Pennsylvania, that's the choice they get?
Well, let me just say, the people of Pennsylvania are some of the best people. 13 months, 1,500 miles every single week. The overwhelming majority of the rooms I walk in, I was the only Black person in the room. And yet I felt like I was their sister. I felt like we were that we had a meeting of the minds and we were trying to fight and win our country back. I absolutely love the people of Pennsylvania. My heart grieved, just because I believe they deserve good leadership. I believe they deserve people who will actually, not just Pennsylvania, but all of America. My heart grieves for us. We are living in very serious times, and we have some very unserious, quote unquote, leaders right now, right? And everybody seems to be lining their own pocket. When you look at Nancy Pelosi and her husband, Paul Pelosi, what appears to be some insider trading going on, who knows, right? And you see that time and time again. You see all this money going over to Ukraine and no one can tell you where the money is going. But hey, let's trust them. Although Ernst & Young ranks Ukraine in the top 5 most corrupt countries in the world, right? But hey, let's just send over another, $12 billion. And if you don't do it, you must be a Russian sympathizer, right? You can't have any honest dialogue about some very serious things that are going on right now. And that is the reason why I ran. I am the most unlikely candidate. Just to give some perspective, I ran against, my 2 main primary opponents. They spent, when you look at what they spent and the money from the PACs, they spent $60 million on a primary race, right? I spent less than $2 million and all of it came from the people. But this is what you get by 13 months, 1,500 miles, knocking on every door. I have no regrets. Yeah. I left it all out there on the road. Now, the people have chosen, in large part because Sean Hannity is a jackass. Can I say that?
Yes.
Can I say that here?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Amen. Hallelujah.
The people were manipulated. The people were manipulated. We were going to win. Sean Hannity is a jackass, but we already know that. I don't think that's a cuss word. I was asking Jesus about that on the way up here.
It's a donkey.
It's a donkey, right? It's another way of saying donkey, but he is.
Term of endearment.
I know. But nonetheless, we're now in a race. I am not on the ballot. I will be walking in, voting Republican all the way down, because God knows Fetterman is a hot mess, and I would never vote for him. And I would encourage Pennsylvanians to do the same, to walk in and not vote for Fetterman.
Yeah.
What did
I
Hannity do?
would actually even say Hannity is a statist stooge, and I definitely agree
he's
with
a
your
puppet.
sentiments.
He's a puppet.
Absolutely.
Remember-
a puppet of the intelligence agencies.
I was
but
on
I
his
really,
show for 7
Yeah.
different times. He never once asked me any of those riveting questions
And-
that he wanted to ask in the last 5 days.
And what you're saying about the ESG score is the nail on the head. It's one of the most important issues that no one else wants to really
the
talk about.
most important topic.
And you covered it very, very well, which again, a lot of people don't do that. And a lot of people are afraid to talk about these issues. So I commend you for having the courage for doing so and speaking about these issues so boldly. But I just wanted to ask you specifically, what in the world do you think Donald Trump was thinking endorsing Oz over you? What was going through his head? What's going on here?
Before you answer,
now,
I-
y'all know I got to go back to Pennsylvania, right? So don't get me in trouble
Well, I wanna-
with the people.
I look forward to,
Pennsylvania.
assuming we ever get the opportunity, sitting down with former President Trump and just saying to him, now, when you made the terrible mistake of endorsing Dr. Oz over Kathy Barnett, did you do it on purpose, or were you aware that it was a tremendous mistake and you did it anyway?
Well,
Call me
Oz
when you
is
ask me that
famous, and I love fame. Like, what's he? I don't know.
What was he
He's
thinking?
drawn to the light. You know,
Everyone
like a moth.
agrees. Everyone agrees it was a terrible mistake. You should not have endorsed Oz. Everyone's saying. At least that's what I was told. What would you say to that?
What did it? Well, I was going to ask what Hannity. What did he do that in the last
He lied.
about you?
He lied.
Really?
Oh, he dragged me. He dragged
To
me
your
all
face?
across. No, he's a punk. Of course he wasn't, right? And I went on Twitter and I said, well, since you have all of these riveting questions, I am gonna, I'm gonna hold Monday, 9 p.m. Come into studio. You, the other person you are really, in love with and helping. It'll be 2 against 1. I'll come in. You can ask me all of these riveting questions, but that's not the point. The point is they looked up and they were like, oh my God, this little black chick is about to win. And we can't have that, right? Because what was done to me was not, and this is something for the Republican Party, right? For the voters to pay attention to, that I was not dragged with these horrible lies, right? Calling me a Black Lives Matter supporter, that I'm a part of Black Lives Matter. They would get a picture of me and they would flash a picture of me after saying Black Lives Matter, or flash a picture of me after saying black rioters, right?
Nice.
Of playing those really stupid games. And it wasn't the left who was doing this to me. It was my own party, which just shocked the world. I mean, I know, politics is dirty, but that's a whole nother level. And I'm a conservative, and I don't think it was racist necessarily, although racism and elitism feels a whole lot alike in today's economy of things. No one came to my house and told me to walk out and try to, lynch me or anything like that. That's real racism, right? Mm-hmm. But this was really ugly. It was really nasty. It wasn't just politics as usual. But the Republican Party, I know they want us to be all about the party. And I recognize, and it's such a dichotomy for me, because there's no way on God's green earth would I ever vote for a Democrat, right? And we live in a 2-party system. So you're either voting for one or the other. And yet it was my values that brought me to the Republican Party. It was my values that got me involved in these political races. And I do not believe I have to abdicate my values in order to support the party. I think it's our business to beat the party into alignment. And right now we have not just a cabal among ESG corporate board members or a cabal among Democrats, but we have it also within the Republican Party. And if I could just say one more thing. Let me just throw this out here as well. I have a tremendous amount of hope. by what I saw in my race. In my race in those last 5 days, we were about to win. And I saw over 330,000 Pennsylvanians, almost a third of Pennsylvanians came out and voted for me, right? And they did so in defiance of millions of dollars of lies from people like, Rick Grinnell, Greg Kelly, Sean Hannity. They defied them. They also defied all of the Trump influencers who came out and said, don't vote for her. They defied Donald Trump himself. And they still came out and voted for me. That gives me a tremendous amount of hope, right? That people are not willing to just check their brains at the door and just do as they're told. People are waking up. Something what you said a little bit earlier. People are being red pilled and they're recognizing something has gone fundamentally wrong with how our nation is being governed, and we want different. The problem is that I lost by roughly 5 points, and it was as a direct result, I believe, of what people who say they are conservative, people who say they are a part of our party, did to shove someone else down our throat. And so now we got to live with that decision. But I still have a tremendous amount of hope by when I see how my race turned out, and that people they refuse to be denied a better option.
Hannity may as well have endorsed Fetterman, because Dr. Oz is unrelatable and unlikable, and that gives Fetterman a huge advantage. Look, I've seen the videos that Fetterman puts out. He's got health issues. He's got something, really, really wrong with his neck. I hope he's okay. I don't know what that is. He was always wearing, it was the weirdest thing. He's in suits and he's wearing a scarf. And it's because he's got something seriously wrong. I mean, the man had a stroke. But you look at the videos and Dr. Oz pronounces the name of a store wrong. Now, this was a big, I don't know if you got, what did he say? What was it, Wegmans or something?
Wegmans. I don't remember how.
And then he was like, my wife's trying to make crudité, and it's just like, who is he trying to pull suburban white upper class voters or something? And then Fetterman comes out and he really tries to play up to the Philadelphia, working class Democrat, good old boy or whatever. These are the guys that showed up when Antifa was trying to tear down the Christopher Columbus statue. This is a predominantly Democrat city. Yeah. That's what Fetterman is going for. When Hannity came out and he tanked your campaign and then helps prop up Oz, he was basically saying, I hope Fetterman wins.
Listen, Fetterman is horrid. I mean, horrible, right? I mean, he was horrible before the stroke. Now he's horrible
with health issues.
A horrible person who had a stroke, right? Yeah. That's who he is, essentially. From his physical appearance before the stroke, his physical appearance after the stroke, his ideologies, his thing, the man chased down a black man with a shotgun.
That's crazy.
It's a great story.
What was that story? What happened?
Exactly. The black man was just outside trying to get some exercise and just jogging.
He claimed he heard some gunshots. So he grabbed a shotgun, went outside, and there was a black guy jogging, and he chased after him.
What?
Yeah.
Crazy.
Just happened to see a random black man running, right? And then, he drops his son off, runs in the house, gets his shotgun, gets in his truck, barrels down on this black man, and holds him there with the shotgun up to his chest until the police came, right? And said, I was thinking about, one of the school shootings, and, and I thought I heard a gunshot. Dude, it's Saturday morning, 9:00 in the morning.
Right. It was,
school's not in.
Right, and it was fireworks. It was very different sound.
I have absolutely no idea, but this is a horrible individual, and he would make a horrible senator. And my hope is that people will wake up. And yet, at the same time, I have to say, if we keep holding our nose, voting for the lesser of two evils, you have to begin to ask yourself as conservatives, what are we actually conserving? Yeah. We now have red flag laws. We now have 87,000 new IRS agents who may or may not be armed, who the IRS has told to now start tracking transactions of $200 or greater. We now have open borders. It's just a litany of things that we were like, we don't want. So at some point, maybe November 9th, we'll be ready to have a conversation about what we need to do to make sure that our own elites within the Republican Party don't tank the next conservative who's about to win solely because they want to keep control.
Yeah, this is how they get you with the voting for the lesser of two evils. This has been the Ponzi scheme run on the American people for very long. And then, of course, you have Dr. Oz, who was an early promoter of trans children all the way back in 2010. And just back to the question, because I'm really curious. Why do you think Donald Trump did this? Was it because Sean Hannity was in his ear, or was there something else happening behind the scenes?
Yeah, no comment.
I think
I
so.
gotta go back home, guys.
I think Hannity, for whatever reason, wants Fetterman to win. I love that moment where Tucker Carlson is doing the handoff with John Hannity, and he's talking about, I think he was talking about Amazon and Amazon screwing over the American people. And then as he's handing it off, Hannity goes, it's a private corporation. If they want to provide a good and people pay for it, they're allowed to do it. And Tucker just does the Tucker face like, what?
What? Yeah.
Like that was like a clear split between the populist new MAGA Republican base, which Tucker is a big proponent of and a big part of, and then the old corporatist neocon Republican establishment of Hannity. Hannity talks with Trump, probably said, you got to go with Oz so that Fetterman wins. I don't think he literally said that. He probably just lied to Trump, and Trump was like, Oz, huh? Okay, I'll go with Oz.
I don't think Trump wants Fetterman to win.
I don't think Trump does. I think Hannity does.
I think that we have a party outside, I'm not talking about Oz, I'm not talking about the race, I'm just saying in general, and it's something that I said the entire time when I was on the campaign trail, that we have the Republican elites, they are not as concerned about winning as you and I may be concerned about it. They are more concerned about control. If the GOP was interested in winning, they would be knocking down my door trying to get someone like me who was able to move the needle, not just within Republican conservatives, which I have a strong grasp on, but the ability to walk into any community and share our story and move people into our category. We need that kind of energy and enthusiasm desperately within the Republican Party. And if the Republican GOP, the elites, the machine within that was interested in winning, they would have my little brown face all over the place, but they don't, because it's not about winning. It's about, let's make sure we control the narrative, and we only have our people and our faces out there saying what we want them to say. And that is, again, my heart grieve, because I don't believe it's hyperbole. We're about to lose our country. And I know most Americans don't think that that can happen, but I believe we're on the precipice.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.